Now, returning back to our interviews, I'm joined now by Matt Welsh, Senior Software Engineer at Google, who is with us to talk about mobile speed and lessons from the desktop side. Matt, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So at Google, you're working on, quote, making the mobile web fast. What does that involve?
Well, so as we all know, mobile web is painfully slow. And anyone who's ever sat there with their phone going, why is it not working and why am I not getting the website, has felt the pain. And obviously mobile is super important because if you think about it, the sheer number of users that have access to mobile phones in the future is going to outstrip the number of people that use desktop web.
Right.
So, and this is true especially in developing countries and places where you're not having a fancy MacBook Air or something like that. Most of the time when you're interacting with the web, it's on a phone. So we felt it was really important to put a big emphasis on mobile performance for the web as a whole, not just for Google products, but to make the whole mobile web fast, because Google has a idea that, look, if everybody is able to use the internet, if it's faster for more users, then this is obviously a good thing for Google, but it helps to support the whole global internet ecosystem.
Sure. So I know this is a broad question, but what are the key differences between the mobile web and the desktop?
Right. Well, obviously the number one thing is the fact that on mobile, the devices are much more limited, but the networks that you're connecting through are painfully slow most of the time.
Right.
And it's true that for people in developing countries where the infrastructure is not as good as we have, with our broadband internet at home, DSL and cable modems that are super fast, that they're not experiencing fast desktop web either. But in the mobile case, it's sort of universally slow for everyone. And a big part of that is the fact that if you think about the protocols that drive the web and the browsers and the interactions that they have with the underlying networks, we're just layering HTTP and TCP/IP and web frameworks and so forth on top of a network that was not designed to support it. The cellular networks were designed originally to carry voice and have evolved over time to carry data, but the overall way in which the radio access network operates is not optimized for the web. And so we have this big performance gap between what web browsers do and what the mobile phone networks are doing, right? And so a big chunk of our work is looking at how do we close this gap? How do we actually design protocols, design frameworks, design best practices for designing mobile websites that make sure that you're not just doing stupid things on the radio that make it slower than it has to be.
Sure. So how does the growth of the mobile web compare to the early growth of the desktop web?
Yeah,
are there lessons there that can be applied?
Yes, I mean, if you look right now, I mean, we've seen, there's nice data that shows that in the, I think, mid-90s when the desktop web really started to take off, we had this exponential growth curve of the number of users on the web. And if you look at mobile web performance, mobile web usage today, it is exceeding the rate of growth of desktop back in the mid to late 90s. So what we're expecting to see is that in the future, the vast majority of internet users will in fact be mobile users. And I think there's some real opportunities there. The other challenge that we have in the mobile space is that, given that there's such a wide range of devices, a Mac and a Windows and a Linux box are all kind of the same from a browser perspective. But, different phone models, you've got feature phones, tier 1, 2, 3 phones, you've got iPhones, you've got Android phones. They all perform and behave quite differently than each other. So it's not so easy to just come up with a one-size-fits-all solution.
Sure. What are the most common mistakes from desktop's early growth that mobile web developers should be aware of as they move into this space?
Right. Well, it's challenging because in a lot of ways, the mobile web. If you took the web circa 1995, it would work quite well on mobile devices, right? But the web has evolved to this ridiculously complex set of technologies and things that are being layered on top that mean that the sites are more sophisticated. We're doing much heavier JavaScript, CSS, lots more dynamic stuff on the sites than we were back in the early days of the web. And so the techniques that people are employing to make desktop web faster certainly help mobile for the most case. But what you actually see does the best job at making performance better is stripping down the site to something that really resembles a circa 1997 or so website.
Old school.
And that's frustrating, and I think that it means that for web developers they have this 2 different sites to maintain, or sometimes multiple different sites to maintain, if they're going to be working on mobile as well as desktop.
So I think I know the answer to this, but overall, what do you think is the current state of mobile websites? Are they in total disrepair?
It's
Are we getting
actually
better?
a really good question. I think the answer is no one really knows that much about it yet. One of the first things we're doing in our group is actually studying the state of the mobile web as it exists today. And Steve Suiters is part of the team, and so he's developed the HTTP archive, which is starting now to collect data both for desktop and mobile sites that we can do trends analysis and go back and say, okay, over the course of time, how are sites improving or not improving as new technologies are introduced? We don't really know yet what are the main factors that are affecting mobile website performance. We don't really know yet what the state of the mobile web is. It's not as well understood. The tools aren't there yet, so mobile web developers have to face a lot of challenges. They don't have beautiful frameworks for doing their testing and development and performance analysis. And so the answer is we just don't have a good handle on that, and I think that's the first thing we need to do.
So, sort of the very last question for you. And I'm asking you to put on your futurist hat here,
Right.
but where are we going to be in a year with mobile websites? I'm not going to hold you to it.
Right.
So
Well, you know, my goal on the team that we've got is we've set a very specific goal, which is we would like to improve the performance of the mobile web by, say, 30% over the course of the next year or two. Now, that's an overall metric for the entire mobile web, not for Google products in particular. And so the question is, how do we get there? Well, there's going to be a lot of aggressive things that need to happen. Cellular networks are getting faster. 4G LTE networks are incredibly fast. I get something like 25 megabits per second download speed on my phone. This is going to have a profound impact on the speed of mobile, but you know, you can't just rely on the mobile carriers rolling out faster bandwidth to solve the problem. The sites need to be tuned for the way that the devices interact with the network as well. And so what we really hope to do is push out tools and techniques that, you know, my hope is that within a year or two we're looking at substantially better performance for most users, and then we have to look at not just the power users in places like, you know, the United States and Europe, which have fantastic internet speeds, but in developing countries as well, where I think that mobile is even more important in those countries. And if we can close that gap, we're going to bring more users online and we're going to give more users a better experience.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.